Welcome everyone to another edition of Playthrough, and on this edition it's Mega Man 5, Rockman 5, part of the Mega Man Complete Works Collection for the PlayStation 1, released in 1999. In Japan, they decided to take all of the classic Mega Man games and re-release them as individual titles. There was also a compilation with all of these games together later on down the line. These games contain two versions of whichever game they're based off of, including the original kind of untouched version, which does include a save on the memory card, so you don't have to worry about passwords, as well as a remix kind of version where basically you have some hints and some interactions with the characters of the Mega Man universe, and have the health bars and energy bars changed to better reflect those from the Mega Man 8 title. I also have to say, of all the Rockman Complete Works Collection games, this one has my favorite cover art, that is for sure. I love the whole Mega Man with the Proto Man and all their really cool box art. One of my favorites from this set of games, and one of my favorites with the classic Mega Man license. Here we have the intro to the original Mega Man 5, of course with Japanese text, before we get into the main game. Not a whole lot of story here, all done kind of with little bits of just cutscenes, with Proto Man kind of taking Dr. Light away, kidnapping him, and now we think that Proto Man is the villain of the game. Just like with Mega Man 4, of course, we're going to find out things aren't just the way they seem, but still, that kind of gets us into it. And now, of course, once we get into the main game itself, we're going to be selecting from one of the 8 Robot Masters to start with, and the first one we're going to go to is Starman. No surprise that Starman has a space theme to him, and in Mega Man 5 there wasn't a whole lot of innovation with the character. We still have the charged up ability from Mega Man 4 and still have the slide ability, and these are going to be very useful for helping us. In this different version of the game, instead of having to press down and hitting the jump button in order to do the slide, you can actually just press the circle button on the PlayStation controller in order to do the slide, which is a nice little added feature. As well as in all versions of this Rockman Complete Works Collection, you can use L1 and R1 to quickly switch between the different Mega Man abilities once you end up unlocking them, of course. One thing that's added to this game is collectible letters, spelling out the word Rockman 5, and if you're able to collect all of the letters throughout the 8 Robot Master levels, you unlock Beat the Bird, who ends up aiding you in your quest, and actually ends up being the weakness for a couple of the late game bosses, so it's well worth your time to go and grab the letters. Almost every one of the letters is actually just in plain sight, sometimes a little bit difficult to grab, but usually in plain sight, with the exception of the one in Stoneman's level, which requires you to blow open a wall in order to find it. I will be collecting all the letters, though, in this run in order to get beat, though. This segment here, I'm going to use the gravity and take a couple of hits and get my way over, watching out for all the Mets that are now floating in space with their little space helmets and all, trying to chase me down. Thankfully, all of Starman's level has that anti-gravity kind of thing going on with it, and that allows me to kind of jump over a lot of the enemies throughout the course of it to avoid a lot of the conflicts. I still take a lot of damage, but at least I'm able to get past them. Here we go with Starman's battle now. Now, Starman is the easiest of the Robot Masters to take out. He also has an ability that's very similar to the likes of Skullman and Woodman with a shield around him. When he throws the shield out at us, we're able to, of course, hit him, and because of the anti-gravity, we're able to get some pretty big jumps on him and easily be able to jump over his shield or be able to easily get underneath him when he jumps really high up into the air. And as you can see, the Mega Buster, with charged up shots or even with just a normal shot, ends up doing a pretty good amount of damage to him and ends up being able to drain his health. And once he's done, we're going to be moving on to the next one. Next up of the Robot Masters we're going to be taking on is Gravity Man. Of course, I'm going to be doing these in the order that best fits the weakness. So completing one Robot Master, then moving on to the one that he ends up being weak against. And the Gravity Man's theme, pretty simplistic and understandable, being an anti-gravity kind of thing, mostly with these turn arrows. Anytime you see an arrow facing down, your Mega Man will be forced to go downwards, and anytime you see an arrow facing up, you're going to be forced to go up. There's some nice scrolling during the course of this part here as we watch out for a couple of giant mace balls, and we have these enemies here that, when we get close to them, they end up kind of spiraling up towards the ceiling. Here we have to kind of watch out and then jump onto this little right wall and then jump over to the left side, and that allows us to hit the arrow, because making contact with the arrow is what makes the whole anti-gravity or thing end up happening. Thankfully, right down here, we're able to grab a big health replenishment, so if you're taking damage throughout the course of the level, hopefully this will be able to bring you right back up to your top. These big giant guys here with the big boosters and try to jump on top of you, there's a lot of Mega Man games that end up having guys like this. Usually we're just going to slide under them. Just a few moments ago, you saw that I used the arrows to my advantage to help me grab the letter for this stage. You have to be careful when doing so, though, because if you end up falling upwards, it still counts as falling into a pit, so you want to make sure you don't end up losing a life that way. Be careful here, jumping over across this small set of spikes, and then immediately hug the right D-pad button so you're able to land safely, and then we're going to be entering into Gravity Man's boss lair, where we're going to be using Starman's ability in order to help us out. Starman's ability is one of those ones where you have to hit it in order to bring it up, and then hit it again in order to throw the shield out. It easily deflects all of Gravity Man's abilities and allows us to easily hit him with it as we move back and forth. Gravity Man, for the most part, will just switch the gravity on us and fire single shots out at us, making this fight an extremely easy one, especially early on in the game, and once he's taken care of, we're moving on to the next level. The third of the Robot Master levels we're going to be doing is Gyro Man, and this is the air kind of level of the game, and we start off with an elevator sequence, something that we haven't really dealt with before, as we just kind of go up the elevator and then over to the right to really begin the level itself. Here we have a bunch of these cannons that have shields in front of them. When you get close to them, they'll activate and eventually open up, allowing us to hit them. Of course, they're going to fire out a projectile at us. Sometimes it gets a bit annoying waiting for them, and I mistime it, so try to do your best to deal with them the best way you can, and then continue on up the set of ladders and move up to the top portion here. Thankfully, not long into the level, you can grab a big health replenishment if you want it, or an extra life here in the lower right corner of this area, while watching out for the chicken robot. There's a lot of these chicken robots throughout the game where you'll have to deal with them, take them out, and they show up little chickens and try to take you out with them, but for the most part, pretty easy to deal with. But if you run into them themselves, the big robot chicken, they end up, of course, doing a pretty good amount of damage, so you want to be careful of that. Then in this segment here, just move on through any of the layers, top, bottom, or middle. Then right here, we're going to watch out for another one of these big giant robots sliding underneath of them when he kind of boosts up over top of us and easily getting up to the top portion. Now, when we make it up here, this is one of the harder letters to get. We have to wait a second, and then wait for the platform to fall, and then as soon as it starts falling, then jump off of it so that we're able to land safely and continue on the level without falling into the pit, but also grab that letter. Definitely one of the tougher ones in the game to get, and you may end up losing a life or two while attempting to do so, so that's why grabbing that life early on in the level ends up being pretty helpful. This segment here, pretty easy to deal with all the spikes that are kind of coming down. You can slide underneath and get around them as it's slowly kind of scrolling upwards so that you're able to survive. And then moving on to the next part, we're going to deal with a couple of floating robots as we slide on down and enter into the boss chamber against Gyro Man. And no surprise, we're going to be using Gravity Man's ability. Now this is a weird ability. It just flashes the screen and does damage. And in fact, with Gyro Man, ends up being a really quick and fast battle because you're able to easily flash him and just move a little bit, and Gyro Man's done. He does have gyros he throws out, and they can go in multiple directions, and it's a bit of a tough fight if you decide to take him on with just the Mega Buster, but if you use Gravity Man's ability, this fight is an absolute joke. Next up, we're going to enter into Crystal Man's level, and we started off with a few of these weird robots with the ball robot part of them over top of them that's kind of like hovering. Taking out the body will just cause the top part to bounce around, so you can take out whichever one you want to first. Overall, Mega Man 5 is probably the one I played the least amount when I was younger. It was one of the ones I didn't actually own until I actually got older. And because of that, there's not a whole lot of the Robot Masters I really have kind of like nostalgia for, with the exception of my favorite one from this game, which we'll be getting to relatively quickly as we continue through the rest of the game. Up here we have these kind of like crystal skull robot guys that form crystals or diamonds and throw them at us. Reminds me of some of the guys we saw in Skullman's level back in Mega Man 4. Now up here, we're going to jump on this little rotating platform. I waited a moment so that the projectiles would dissipate around me, allowing me easily to get up to that ladder in the upper left. So if you hesitate just a bit, wait for them to kind of fire a couple of times, you'll be able to easily get up. If you mistime it, you'll start going upwards, hit one of those, and end up falling down into the pit below. Then we're going to drop on down, watching for a few more enemies, sliding on through here. Up above there, you may want to grab that. That M-Tank is the way to replenish all of your abilities instantly. I will be grabbing and using one later in the game. Now, when you're falling through that big area there with multiple spikes, be sure to hug the left D-pad button a little bit so that you're able to grab the letter while falling. Unfortunately, if you miss it, you're going to want to lose a life though, or have to come back to the level later on if you want to grab that particular letter. Then we're jumping in though to Crystal Man's lair. We're going to be using Gyro Man's ability in order to take him out. You can throw Gyro Man's ability up or straight at Crystal Man or any enemy by either holding up on the D-pad or just hitting it normally in order to fire straight. Crystal Man's ability will fire out and actually break apart into multiple little crystals or marbles that bounce around. This actually is the same thing once you have the ability, and it will bounce around and actually take out enemies as it does bounce around. The only issue is you can only fire one out at a time, which makes a few areas where you're going to use it a little bit more difficult if you end up missing your target initially. Either way, when he is done, we're moving on to the next Robot Master, which happens to be my personal favorite from Mega Man 5, and that is Napalm Man. Napalm Man has a theme that's set in a jungle setting, and initially some people may not end up understanding what the theme is here, but to me, immediately when I think Napalm is unfortunately the Vietnam War, but more specifically, I think of Apocalypse Now, one of my favorite movies of all time, and the whole line of I love the smell of napalm in the morning, which ends up fitting well with this. So I guess that's pretty much what they were going for, Napalm Man level, Vietnam theme. You have tigers in the jungle, and overall that's kind of what they were going for. A little bit morbid in a lot of ways, but still ends up being my favorite level in the game just because of that. This part right here can be a pretty big pain because you have those little like mine robot guys that can end up knocking you backwards down into the pits with the waterfalls pulling you left and right. I love the Sniper Joe guys though, riding in the helicopters. They're one of my favorite enemies in this game for sure. Also returning from Mega Man 4 is Eddie, aka Flip Top, who ends up giving us a couple of different items throughout, and of course these are random, so you never know quite what you're going to get. You may get item replenishment, health replenishment, or an extra life if you're really lucky. Be very careful here and drop down the right side, hugging the left on the D-pad so that you're able to grab that letter and then continue on moving down a couple of more rows, and then you have to deal with these missiles that not only do you have to deal with, but also when you hit them, they break apart. You may also notice there's some tanks in the background, so that whole like military Vietnam theme is going pretty strong in this level. That is for absolute sure. Stay over here on the far left side before trying to jump over the little pits here, because not only do you have those missiles that pop out of the pits, but you also have those robots that end up shooting out those projectiles out towards you. So you want to keep your distance a bit. Here, just do very small jumps. Wait for the guy to come up and then dissipate and then make those attempts over before eventually entering into Napalm Man's lair, where we're going to be using Crystal Man's ability here. Now, if you miss with Crystal Man's ability, it will break apart and bounce around the room. You won't be able to fire another one out, but those crystals that break off will end up hitting him eventually. For the most part, you have the big napalm bombs he fires out the top of him that will just break apart when they end up hitting the ground, or the missiles he fires straight out. And the timing on them is pretty easy to jump in between those missiles so that you're able to keep hitting them with that Crystal Man ability. With 3 robot masters left to go, we're moving on to Stone Man's level. We've had a few rock-based robot masters throughout the course of the classic Mega Man titles, and this one's no exception as far as like the whole general theme of rocks and construction equipment a little bit and that kind of stuff that we'll have to deal with. You have these robots here that kind of open up as you get close to them. They're like moths or something. I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to be, but either way, they kind of open up when you get near and try to attack you. Over here to the right, we're going to blow open this wall, slide on through, and that is the letter for this level. Like I said, all the letters are pretty much out in the open except for this one. So be sure to make sure you don't end up missing it when coming through Stone Man's level. Here we're going to watch out for a lot of these flying little guys here and make sure you don't fall down this pit. I accidentally have done that a couple of times when I thought, oh, that's where I'm supposed to go, drop down that pit, end up losing a life because the ladder was to the right, and I don't know, I thought I just was supposed to drop down there and make it to the next area that way. Jump up here, grab the big, large health replenishment. Thankfully, that's located there. And then continue on the stage. We're going to take out a couple of these mice robots while avoiding, of course, a few other guys. And look, another giant health replenishment. So, even though I took a lot of damage during the course of this level, those 2 health replenishments pretty much bring me back to full health. And that's why I'm usually not very cautious when it comes to taking some damage from some of the enemies during this level. When you make it up here, watch out for this little firing stationary weapon, and then you're going to jump on the platform, slide across over to the right side, drop down here, wait once again for it to open up in order to hit it. It's easy to dodge, it's just a single projectile. I mean, if you end up getting hit, just slide through. A lot of times I'll just end up getting hit by the projectile or by the other little floating guys and just end up running through that brief bit of invincibility that I end up getting. Climb up here, we're going to head to the right. You can blow open the wall to the right if you want to in order to grab that extra life, but usually at this point I'm doing pretty good, so I don't really worry about that extra life there. Drop on down here, and now we're going to use these to slide across. You got to do a series of quick jumps. If you mess up, you may end up falling into that pit below. There is that energy tank. I honestly recommend missing it because there are easier to grab energy tanks throughout the course of the game. And right afterwards is an Eddie, who will hopefully end up giving you some health if you need it or whatever it ends up being. Like always in the classic Mega Man games other than Mega Man 1, if you end up getting hit and you're near spikes, you can land on the spikes safely and quickly get off of them before that invincibility runs out so you don't end up instantly dying. Here we're going to enter into Stone Man's lair and use Napalm Man's ability. Now, Stone Man likes to jump a lot. Usually when he's jumping towards me, I'll hit him in midair or put a napalm bomb right below him as he's coming near me in order to hit him. He has the rotating rock ability that he uses a lot, which is pretty easy to dodge, as well as he'll break apart when he jumps. Now, when he is a crumbled mess on the ground, you cannot hit him. So that's unfortunate, but usually he reforms a moment later, and you can hit him again with another napalm bomb or Mega Buster if you want to try to do that challenge. But either way, once he's done, we're moving on to that next Robot Master level. The next of the robot masters we're going to be taking on is Charge Man, definitely one of the more unique ones. The whole train themed everything going on in this level is pretty cool. Start off with just a series of robots kind of charging towards you. They do drop bombs below them, but they're easy to take out with a single shot from your Mega Buster. Then you're going to end up on top of the train here. You have some awesome scrolling effect going on in the background once again, and you also have Matools riding trains. They're adorable, they're awesome. You have these little Matools riding these little trains, and they single shot and all that kind of stuff. They can fire out 3-shot spread shot, which can be a little bit annoying, but overall they're just a pretty cool enemy. When you drop down here though, instead of just having you fall and it scroll, it ends up kind of changing where you are, which is kind of interesting. It's like the only level, I think, in the classic Mega Man series that ends up really doing that, where it kind of like teleports you into that next area. You also, during the course of here, have the mouse robots as well as a few of the chicken robots dropping those little egg guys during the course of this. Like, once again, if you end up getting hit, a lot of times I'll just kind of charge through, do a slide if I need to, in order to kind of get past them without too much hassle. Right here, you're going to want to do a big jump, and if you time it right, you'll be able to grab the letter with no problem. You can use the rush coil, of course, or something like that if you really need to, but you should be able to grab that letter with just a normal jump if you do it at the right spot. When you make it to the top of the train here, we're going to take out some more of the Matool train robots, and a few of the other ones spewing out some projectiles off the top of them. Pretty easy area overall, and honestly, a little bit less annoying than the area that we just dealt with a few moments ago, and then drop off the end again, teleporting us again into the next area where we end up making it to the door. Just take out the big giant robot firing missiles out at us. You have to do some jumps up in order to hit in the head area, but then we're moving into Charge Man's lair. And like we've been doing, use the previous weakness, and we're going to be using Stone Man's ability, which is a bit tough to do. The reason for it is Charge Man can kind of go like angry mode here, and he'll charge kind of forward towards you if he's angry, or if he's charging, you can't hit him. So you have to kind of wait for that to dissipate, and then continue to do the stones. He's mostly just going to charge at you, as well as then stop every once in a while to throw the steam missiles up into the air. Pretty easy stuff to dodge. The only annoying part is the fact you can't hit him most of the time. The 8th and final Robot Master is Wave Man, the water-based Robot Master for this game. We start off, we have these pipes that kind of shoot like steam or water up into the air. You gotta watch out for those, as well as the giant baseballs that swing. Thankfully, the chain doesn't end up hurting you, so you can kind of stay safe in that before attempting to go past. Right after that, we have a series of pipes that kind of shoot us on down. If you land here, you'll be able to grab an extra life, watching out for more steam, or just sacrifice a hit and grab it and then continue on like I did. When you make it here, watch out for more steam, and you have these rotating spike guys that kind of like move slowly towards you. Pretty easy area to dodge overall. And then right here, you have to ride bubbles up. Now this area was pretty much reused in Splash Woman's level in Mega Man 9, but for this time around, we're just going to be riding these giant bubbles upwards. I always felt like if I jump a little bit, it moves faster. So I usually end up doing that, but if you end up jumping too much, and you're right near the edge of the screen wherever it ends up changing, you'll end up falling, because you'll fall through the bubble as it goes off screen. So be careful of that if you attempt to do what I did. And then right after that, though, we get to jump on this vehicle, and now get to ride throughout the most of the rest of the level, which is pretty cool. This is one of the cooler aspects of this, and I love the fact they kept doing the scrolling effects. It's something that you don't see in a lot of classic NES games, this really cool kind of scrolling background. It's nothing overly complicated, it's the same background over and over and over again. You'll see the same buildings, but during this we get to take out a couple of Stamper Joe guys on these little vehicles, as well as fish jumping over top of us. And after a little while, we'll have to deal with kind of a mini-boss type of enemy. For this battle, you gotta kind of jump up and smack him in the green lighted thing up on top of his head while jumping over the projectiles. A very easy fight and very easy to jump over his stuff, but if you get a little bit too hasty, you may end up getting hit a little bit. Once he's taken care of, though, we'll move on to the second part of this area, which is just more fish and more Sniper Joe guys that we can jump over and attack in order to keep making our way through the course of the stage. Once we finally make it to the end, we have another cannon waiting for us, and take that out, and then we're moving into Wave Man's lair. Now, for this battle, of course, we're going to be using Charge Man's ability. Now, Charge Man has a unique ability. This improves our slide, actually turning it into an attack. This can be difficult to hit him, because you're going to watch out for the steam that he ends up rising, those wave geysers that he ends up pushing up into the air, as well as he will fire out the hooks at you. But overall, if you're able to kind of get close enough, dodge some of the hooks, dodge some of the geysers, you'll be able to keep doing those slides into them and take them out. And we're moving on to Proto Man's castle. We also have collected all of the letters during the course of the game, so now we have beat the bird robot to help us out if we want him to, taking out enemies around us, though he does have an energy bar just like all the other normal attacks as well. The first level is pretty simplistic as we start off with just some enemies and the giant tigers that we saw in Napalm Man's level first, though they're white tigers here instead of classic orange tigers like we saw earlier, but we're taking them out with a simple charged up Mega Buster shot. Here, you're going to want to manipulate the enemies in order to kind of get them to fall down so you can get over. Or you can mess up like I did and fall down by not timing the jump correctly and then have to redo it. But still, a pretty simple area. When you make it to the far left, though, break out that rush coil and use that to help you bounce upwards in order to get to the ladder. Once you're up here, though, you can grab some health replenishment and item replenishment if you need it already at this point in the level. Then continue on over to the right. Once you make it here, use Rush Jet to start helping you over. And we're going to use 2 Rush Jets. Now, granted, I think you could use a Rush Coil to help you a little bit there, but I like using the Rush Jet better. And I'm going to use it again here to guide me through over most of this part of the level. I've taken a lot of damage, but there's a big health replenishment, so I'm able to fill my meter back up. Knowing wherever there's health replenishments are is pretty much key to being able to kind of bust your way through a lot of the levels in this game. Take out the giant laser mech here. I got lucky, he dropped an extra life. There are some times in this game, and I played it a lot of times, I end up getting consistent life drops. Like, I've had it where I've gotten 3, 4, 5 lives from enemies in a single level. Now right here, you want to use the Rush Jet, or you can, of course, jump around the disappearing, reappearing blocks, but I always do my best not to deal with them. I'm going to use Rush Jet again here to jump up to this top block, and then easily get above. And I'm going to use it again here to pick up this giant health replenishment. So that's one strategy. Of course, you can do the normal strategy, just jumping on the blocks themselves, but I find it much easier, of course, to go ahead and use that Rush Jet. Now, we get to the first of the Dark Man battles here. Basically, the fake Proto Man is known as Dark Man, and the first robot we deal with here is one that's a tank kind of guy who moves relatively slowly, easy to jump over, but we're going to use Wave Man's ability to keep firing at him and taking him out as we dodge his single shots. When we begin the next level, watch out for the spikes that are kind of rolling around. Climb up the ladders. Take up the left ladder. The right one will take you to just that random little cannon guy there. We're going to ignore that, and when we make it up here, bring out that rush coil and use that to help you kind of spring up over here. There may be the enemies waiting for you if you don't do it quick enough, and you may have to take them out before attempting to do the rush coil again and get up on over. Once you're past that, you have more of those tools we saw first in Charge Man's level, using those little locomotives to try to attack us. Then we're going to jump over here, and the reason why you want to actually jump, as you can see, if you don't jump and make those conveyor belt jumps, you're going to fall on a whole set of spikes, which are going to be instant death. You then have another series of conveyor belt jumps, which can be difficult only if you end up getting hit. They're easy if you don't get hit. And then from here, you want to use the ladder, use full charged Mega Buster shots, attacking these guys after or right before they fire out the crystals, and you'll take them out, being able to traverse those platforms safely without having to worry about them. After that, keep on moving on. We're going to use that bottom thing here in order to grab this easy to grab energy tank, though if you keep doing too far over to the right, you will land in the spikes, and the same goes for the health replenishment above that. So you want to make sure you avoid the spikes and then drop on down to the bottom part here. Here, just use that Mega Buster shots. As you can see, you kind of reset the enemy by just moving a little bit to the left every time. And after you get past that, make sure you jump to the ladder. You don't want to fall down into the pit below. Take out the next set of tools here. You can grab another health replenishment if you do want to do so, like I am here. That way I have full health going up this ladder here. When we make it to the top, have a full charge shot ready, and you can take out that tiger kind of waiting for you, and the next one right after that. Pretty easy overall area as long as you have those charge shots ready, and we're entering into the second of the Dark Man battles. For this one, we're going to be using Crystal Man's ability. Now, he's going to kind of charge towards us. He has kind of an attack barrier around him. We're going to avoid that, just keep jumping over him and keep delivering shots with Crystal Man's ability. This ends up being a pretty simple fight. Just keep jumping over him, avoiding him, and keep delivering those shots with Crystal Man's ability. And after only a handful of attacks, he will be done, and we're moving on to the next level. As we move on now to the next level of Proto Man's castle, we start off with a bunch of Sniper Joes and the helicopters up above, and a few of these mine kind of guys that end up seeing us and come towards us. As you can see here, I end up grabbing a couple of extra lives, just that luck of the draw of getting them to drop. Up here, we're going to grab an extra health replenishment if you want it, or you can just kind of move on if you haven't taken any damage from that beginning part. In the next segment here, you got to be a little bit careful here, jump up to these rotating platforms. If you hang on too long, you're going to end up running into the spikes on the left and right side, which of course is going to cause an instant death. On the next part here, you're going to watch out for the tools firing out from their little cannon spots here, taking out this one here before continuing on over to the right side, waiting for the next one. Thankfully, if you end up getting hit on this platform here, you should be able to be safe on the one right below it, taking out a couple more of the Mets at the firing stations, and then going up the next big ladder. Watch out for the enemy fire here, and then switch on over to the rest jet or the rest coil, and then use that to kind of spring your way up to the top portion, and grab a hold of the ladder, and continue on to the top portion here. Now here you have this kind of platform that starts to move when you stand on top of it. You can grab the energy tank and extra life if you want, but you gotta be really quick in order to land safely back on it, so you don't end up missing it falling into the pit, or accidentally mistiming it and landing in the spikes. Watch out for the enemies the best you can, and if you get hit, you land in the spikes, just jump off quickly, so you're eventually able to make it over to the right side into that next ladder. Once you're here, you're going to slide underneath this big giant guy, and then continue on to the very bottom part, where you're going to watch out for another one of the big guys, and then make your way over to the right. There's some cannons here. Now, if you don't take out the big guy, you're going to have a little bit of trouble there, because that cannon may end up hitting you into the pit. but you can land safely. If you time it just right, you can land safely and take out the cannon and then continue onwards. Here you have another one of the big guys. You can easily grab the E-Tank and then climb up the next ladder. Like I said, there's plenty of E-Tanks throughout the course of Mega Man 5 that are easily grabbable. Then, in the next section here, we have these big robot guys that kind of like slam on down when they get on top of us. We're going to try to do our best to avoid them as we're continuing on this one. This platform always reminds me of Super Mario World, with the kind of platforms like that in that game. Then we're going to go into the next of the battles here, and we're going to switch over to Gyro Man's ability and use that to take out this guy here. He slowly starts moving, eventually jumping into the air, firing a lot of projectiles out of this. He also will fire out a series of rings and a 3-shot spread shot that will end up freezing you in place if you get hit, and will cause good damage because he'll end up probably jumping into you, which will do a lot. If you time it right, though, you can deliver a lot of Gyro Man ability, and he'll be done in a matter of moments. The next level starts off, we have these blocks here, and as you shoot them, you'll see that the whole stage ends up falling down. Reminds me a little bit of Castlevania 3 here, with the level collapsing around us. Just make sure you're in a safe spot before you end up shooting out all the blocks, especially when you get to this portion here. You slide underneath, and then make sure you avoid all the spikes. It's a really quick level, not much to it. When we make it to the top, we then get a little bit of a cutscene before the battle begins. Now, for this fight, though, we're going to be using Beat the Bird, so be sure to pull that out as soon as the battle begins. When that fight starts, you'll have Beat out and use him in order to attack this guy. He's going to fire out these wave attack kind of things out to the left and right sides, these electrical walls. You're able to easily jump over them and then they retract back to him, so be sure to jump over them again as they come back at him. And Beat will pretty much do all the work for you, easily taking him out, and once he's done, we're moving on to the Dr. Wily castle of the game. As the first level of Dr. Wily's castle begins, jump up here. You can grab the E-Tank if you want to, but be sure to grab the M-Tank here. When you drop down, land on this platform, or head over to the left. You don't want to drop down the right side, you're going to land on the spikes. Once you're past the platform, head over to the right side so that you can land on the ground level safely, avoiding the spikes. A little bit complicated, a little bit tricky. Usually a life or two is lost during the course of that segment, but hopefully you're able to get by it and then move on to the next portion of the level here. We have a lot of the big cannons trying to fire at you as you're working your way up the ladders. When you make it up to the next portion here, you have a whole set of spikes lining the ceiling and conveyor belts. You're going to want to work your way across, watching out for things along the way. When you make it up here, take out these guys here, and then you're going to use the rush coil or the rush jet, whichever one you prefer, in order to get up to that next ladder in the upper left. Once you're up here, jump on the conveyor belts, and then use these to start platforming your way over. You could use the rush coil on the last one if you want to kind of get that way, so you have a little bit of more distance that you don't have to jump on them. But either way, make sure you're able to safely cross them. A little bit difficult there, because the next segment has the whole kind of top portion of the level crashing down on you, similarly to what we had to deal with back in Mega Man 4 with Dustman's level, with that kind of crashing down on us as we're trying to work our way through. Take out the tools and all the trash that's blocking our way, sliding on through at the most optimal times so that you don't end up getting squashed by the ceiling. After dealing with another one of these robot chicken kind of guys, head up the next ladder in the right. Up here, you're going to deal with more of the big kind of cannons firing at us, as well as a few other little floating robots. And then right above that, you have these guys here with the shields, and they're ready to fire at us. Just wait for them to kind of pull up their shields. They may end up hitting you once or twice as you try to deal with them, along with all the other floating robots. But overall, a relatively easy area before we end up hitting the boss room. Now, this boss is weak to the crystal ability, which may not have a full amount of since we used it a little bit earlier. Now, for this guy, you have to fire at the different parts of the robot, which will then spring out, allowing us to get up high in order to hit him. Now, what you could do if you're really low on crystal ability, use the Mega Buster and then switch back to the crystal ability once you get this second platform to come out, like I'm going to do here. Get this to kind of come out with the regular Mega Buster, and then jump up and then switch to crystal, firing off the last shot in order to finish him off. And now we're moving on to the next Dr. Wily level. As we begin this next stage, watch out for a couple robots falling down from the ceiling and continue on to the right side. Thankfully, they're pretty easy to take out. Single shots will just deal with them as you're watching out for spikes. Be sure to make a big jump here before going down and then landing in the water below. If you hug the left D-pad button, you'll land on another easy-to-grab energy tank. You could also jump up to grab that one if you needed to. So, like I said before earlier on, a lot of easy-to-grab ones throughout. Now this part is a little bit tricky. You have to watch out for these spike guys so you don't get hit and fall backwards into the pit below, as well as spikes that are lining the ceiling, as if you, of course, you make contact with them, it's going to be an instant death. You also have the tools with scuba gear, which I do appreciate, love those guys, but they can be a bit annoying as we're trying to make our way through here. When you make it up here, jump out of the water, and you have a couple more tools here, which will break apart into the 3 little ones. Reminds me of the Goombas in Mario 3, how they had those little Goomba versions of mini Goombas that ended up trying to grab a hold of you and slow you down when you're trying to jump. Either way, once we drop down here, we're going to grab a big health replenishment, watching out for a pit, and taking out another giant chicken robot before hitting that next ladder. Once you're up in this next ladder, take out this robot. It's one of the only ones that I recommend taking out. Take him out, then use the Rush Jet to move your way upwards in order to hit the next ladder. Once you're up here, you do have another one, but you can easily pass him by sliding underneath if you want to, and then go through the boss door. And now it's time to take on the next boss, and we're going to be using Gyro Man's ability in order to take this guy out. Now, this is a pretty complicated boss. He's moving back and forth, floating over top of us, and what we want to do is wait for a few projectiles to pass, then jump on this platform, which will then rise up in a diagonal direction, allowing us to then hit him as he's opened up. You can only attack him, of course, when he's opened up, and just delivering a few of those gyro abilities will do a significant amount of damage and defeat him, and now we're moving on to the next level. As we begin the next stage, there's another easy to grab energy tank if you do want it before going into the Dr. Wily capsule. And now it's time, of course, for the rematches against all of the Robot Masters. We're going to start off, of course, using Starman's ability to take out Gravity Man. Just like before, we're going to use that ability as we move up and down from the ceiling to the floor. Every time we change gravity, we're going to deliver at least one hit with him. If he ends up shooting at us, thankfully, the Starman ability ends up blocking those shots, and of course, every time you defeat a Robot Master, you will get a big health replenishment. The next one is going to use Charge Man's ability as we take on Wave Man for the second time. Once again, trying to do our best to watch out for the geysers and the harpoons that fire out, and delivering those sliding charge shots in order to damage him and take him out that way. Third up is in the lower left corner is our rematch against Stoneman using Napalm Man's ability. He'll, of course, jump around the room, and as soon as he does, we'll deliver those napalm bombs directly where he is when he jumps and lands directly on top of him, allowing us to easily damage him a lot. And once he's done, we're moving on to the next fight. Right after that, we're going to switch on up and go to Wave Man's ability, which may not have a lot left in it since we did use it earlier on in this whole Darkman, Dr. Wily castle. And we're going to use that to take out Starman here, firing at him in order to do a pretty good amount of damage. Now, if you do run out, which you probably will, switch over to that normal Mega Buster, do some full charged up shots while jumping over his shield in order to deliver the final amount of hits in order to take him out and move on to the next one. Next up, we're going to be using Gyro Man's ability to fight Crystal Man. Now, normally Crystal Man jumps immediately as the fight begins, so run underneath of him and deliver an upwards gyro in order to hit him, and then wait for him to kind of land and deliver the next ones. Thankfully, Gyro's ability doesn't take up a whole lot of his energy bar, and you should be able to take him out, even if you used it a little bit earlier on that previous boss that we just fought. Now, since we pretty much exhausted the amount of weapons and all for some of the ones we still need, now's a good time to use that item replenishment. That's why I recommended picking it up. Now, if you want to go into these fights without it, of course you can still beat him with the Mega Buster, but use it here. And now we're going to switch over to Crystal Man's ability to face Napalm Man, my personal favorite. Jumping in between the missiles, delivering those crystal shots, also watching out for the big napalm bombs he throws up into the air in that arcing pattern, but very easy to dodge as long as you have enough space between you and him. And once he's done, we're moving on to the top right corner, and we're going to be switching off into the Power Stone ability to face Charge Man once again. Now, once again, with Charge Man, you have to watch out since he charges, and he also will be angry and firing out those steam missiles out the top of him. And once he's done with all that, when he's in between those abilities, that's when you're going to be able to hit him with your either Mega Buster, if you're just using that, or the Power Stone ability in order to hit him and do a pretty good amount of damage. Once he's done, we have one Robot Master left to deal with, and we're going to be switching on over to Gravity Man's ability, and this of course is Gyro Man's rematch, and this is pretty easy, just like before. Just use it. It really quick, able to kind of just keep using it over and over again, and you'll drain his health in just a matter of moments. He's done, and we're moving on to the boss for the level. Now, for the boss weakness, you can use either Starman's ability, if you have a lot of that left, or you can just use the Mega Buster. Now, this is a long, drag-out fight, that is for sure. If you hit the spikes, you're going to be instantly dead, which really ends up sucking, of course. But your main goal is to, of course, just watch out for him. Every time he decides to appear, Dr. Wily, and pulls the kind of floor towards him with a big magnet, you'll then, of course, be able to hit him when he ends up landing. It's very easy, though. Just kind of move back and forth. Whenever you see him, move to the opposite platform, just move away and deliver a full charged up shot. And just, it'll take a little bit, of course, because it's quite a lot of full charged up shots you'll need, but it's a really easy fight, especially this late in the game. And now it's time for the final Dr. Wily level of the game. We start off with one of those big mechs firing lasers out at us, taking out a cannon then right below it, and then dropping down a couple of screens. Thankfully, you don't gotta worry about spikes while dropping down here, and then take out another one of the giant mechs, and that's time to enter the boss room, the final Dr. Wily fight, which of course has two forms. For the first form, we're going to be using the Super Arrow ability, something we haven't used in the entire game. And this is actually a missile type ability you can actually land on and ride it if you want to, but just keep firing it into the giant tank, dodging as much as you can the giant balls that he ends up firing out. Now, once that form is defeated, we're moving on to the final form, and we're going to be using Beat the Bird. This is very similar to the fight we saw in Mega Man 4, with the Dr. Wily capsule teleporting around. He has a couple of moves he'll use, but Beat will find him. Sometimes you may need to jump in the air in order for Beat to locate him. But for the most part, your job is just going to be to dodge him. He has two moves here. When he appears, he launches out a firing power shot that ends up rolling across the ground. And the other one is a rotating set of projectiles that goes around him and then kind of expands and then slowly closes in on him. It's very easy to dodge. In fact, this is one of the easiest Dr. Wily capsule bosses to avoid, especially when he appears on either the far left or the far right side of the screen. But for the most part, you're just going to want to keep avoiding those projectiles and let Beat do his job. Now, of course, if you end up running out of Beat's ability, which is possible, just use your normal projectiles, your full charged up Mega Buster, and you'll be able to finish off Dr. Wily. And of course, when he is done, you get to sit back and enjoy the ending to Mega Man 5. So, there you have it, Mega Man 5, the classic original Mega Man 5, Rockman 5, here on the PlayStation 1. Like I said before, not my favorite, one of the ones I actually owned last, and I think the last of the classic Mega Man games I actually did complete. But there are some big pluses to the game. There is some decent music, of course. All the Mega Man games have good music, as well as there are a couple of Robot Masters I do end up liking, Charge Man, and of course my favorite end up being Napalm Man. I always find it funny nowadays that Mega Man 5 is actually one of the rarer of the classic Mega Man games, mostly because it was still released by Capcom late in the NES life, whereas Mega Man 6, which was of course the final one for NES, ended up getting published by Nintendo in North America, which ended up helping it get a few more copies printed. But thankfully, I was able to get a copy of Mega Man 5 and this Rockman Complete Works Collection pretty early on as far as my video game collecting went, so I don't have to
deal with the prices it goes for now. Thankfully though, Mega Man 5 has been re-released several times, not only from the original NES, but also this version on PlayStation 1, which is actually also on PlayStation 3 if you want to grab a hold of that one, and has been a part of the Legacy Collection, now on the PS4, Xbox One, and 3DS, as well as the other collection, which was on the Nintendo GameCube, PS2, and original Xbox. After the credits roll up and we see the presented by Capcom screen with Beat the Bird showing up, pressing start here will actually take you to kind of the congratulations screen, which will also give you your time, however long it took you to complete the game, which always excludes cutscenes and the like, because it only says 37 minutes for this run. We're now going to head, though, into the gallery mode and look at all of the little profiles on the enemies and the robot masters for the game. You can go to Dr. Light's lab here, and you get little profiles on all of the robots from the course of the Mega Man 5, along with a brief bio. You also get health and attack, which I think is based on if you actually take them out during the course of the game. Like, if you decide to not fight them and just run past them, which is what I do most of the time when playing, they don't end up giving you that information, but still, it's kind of cool that this was all included and gives you that little bit of extra info about these absolute classic games. We then jump on over to the boss section here, where we get to see all the Darkman battle forms, and then also all the Dr. Wily bosses we fought, and finally all the robot masters we got to battle with the really cool artwork, the official artwork that was done for each of the robot masters, which ends up looking really cool in my opinion. This stuff still stands up as being absolutely awesome. So there you guys have it, Mega Man 5, Rockman 5 with a Complete Works Edition for the PlayStation 1. That's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course I hope you enjoyed.